So let's talk a little bit about. I want to show just a slide real quickly on Classroom Commander, just if people are on the call that aren't familiar with it. But you've also integrated your devices, your student devices, with Classroom Commander. And if you're not familiar with Classroom Commander, this is kind of a mock-up of not what Trevor's classroom looks like, because there's all sorts of desks in rows. It's like the typical 1940s classroom, but but we had to show it somehow. So you have these desks and these rows, but you have the ScreenBeam here in the front and the teacher device here in the foreground and all the student devices. And what happens with Classroom Commander essentially is you're able to connect to all the student devices to the ScreenBeam. And remember, Trevor said it connects faster than his network sometimes. And that's a neat thing about ScreenBeam in this case, is that it doesn't use your network to carry the signal. So even if your network is down, which I would imagine that happens ever so often, Trevor, I don't know what your
Yeah.
environment's like, but I know a lot of schools. I follow districts and things on Twitter. I follow New York City DOE on Twitter, and it's always on Facebook, and there's always like, okay, the Bronx is down, the entire network is like, okay, everybody keep going. And so you see those kind of things flying around, but this doesn't rely on that. So I'm able to connect all my students and the teacher. Then if I'm using the view of the teacher to see what a student is doing, or I'm walking up and I see that they're working on something that I want to share with the rest of the class, I can zoom in on their screen, and then I can easily send it to the front of the room. And then I can either interact with that if I have a touch screen in the front of the room. I can actually write on their screen or interact with what they're doing, but then I can pull the control right back to my device. And keep in mind, I'm doing all of this, or I should be doing all of this in a mobile environment, being able to not be in the front of the room or in one place to be able to do that. And then I can take some control back and continue my instruction, in this case with OneNote here. And then I can maybe see that a couple of students are off task, and I can also do things like lock their screens, lock the mouse, lock the keyboard, and I can send out web pages, which I know Trevor will talk about that. He does some of that. You can send out a link that opens up automatically on all the student devices. So if you're seeing this for the first time, you're probably saying to yourself, oh, that looks just really familiar. It looks like lab software that I've seen that monitors students. But Trevor and I were talking about this yesterday. It's not, we don't look at this as a monitoring software, because if you're using your software in a wireless display environment like this, if you're using it as monitoring software, you've really missed the whole point of being in a wireless display environment. Because if you've got a device that you can walk around with, that has a pen, that has touch, that is that 2-in-1 environment, even if it's a laptop, even if that's what you've got, you work with, as teachers, we work with what we have. But you should be moving around the room, working with your students and doing those kind of things. And so we don't look at this at all as a monitoring software. Yes, you can do that, but it's really about a collaboration in a collaborative environment, and really bringing the control, giving some control to your students, getting them involved, getting them excited about using and sharing their devices and sharing their screen. Can you tell us a little bit about what that experience has been like for you, Trevor, in your classrooms with this?
Yeah. So for my classroom, I focus on the 4 C's of 21st century learning a lot. So the communication, critical thinking, creativity, and collaboration. Classroom Commander is great for all of those. Some of the biggest pieces that I use with it is the communication piece. My students will be working on a slideshow or a presentation for whatever they're learning about, and I can then quickly display their presentation from wherever I am. If they aren't comfortable standing up in front of the class, it happens, they can sit at the back, they can hit next, and they can kind of talk through it that way. There's a chat feature in Classroom Commander too, which is cool to use back and forth between computers. We use it for Q&A. We ask questions through it. We've even used the Classroom Commander feature to make our own satellite in our space unit. So some of my students had a computer running Classroom Commander as their screens in the hallway, and we had mission control set up projecting the main screen. They were chatting back and forth, and it was so cool to watch because we weren't limited by like our Wi-Fi connection. We could chat back and forth. It was really, really cool to watch.
Oh man, that's so I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So you had the teacher device was kind of the mission control device,
Yeah,
and they could see all the screens like you would in like a mission control environment. And then
yeah.
they were outside the classroom, and then there was other stuff going on in the classroom, and they were chatting back and forth between the two.
So the students in the hallway, they had like a big cardboard box on their head with the screen. So they couldn't see anything that's going on, but they relied on the directions that were given from the students using the chat feature to tell them
Okay.
go forward, go left, right. Um,
Ah,
so if we lost connection, Houston, we had a problem, but for the most part, no issues until they took the helmet off, and that happens in space, but or that was a problem for space, but not for the for us here. So
that's really cool. That's a really neat idea, and that's the kind of thing that we don't expect these kind of tools to be used for. But yeah, it makes sense. Hey, like I said, you teachers, we have to use what we have, and we and make the most of it. So that's really neat.